Welcome along. Thank you very much for coming. This is our final one this year on psychological hazards. It's our third one. And today what I want you to think about is two basic concepts that we're going to push pretty hard because both of them are often missed. The first is one size does not fit all in leadership. So we are going to talk about neurodiversity today and try and dispel the sort of pathologising of it and understand that people do see the world differently, and psychological hazard management is actually about compassionate, trust-based leadership of knowing people who you work with and managing them. And we'll show what happens when that goes wrong. And the reason I'm raising this is a whole lot of humanistic reasons why I'm raising it, but if I look at the claims data that Kim and I see, neurodiversity is well and truly overrepresented in that group because one size tries to fit all and people get harmed. And look at the opportunity loss that comes with it. So I've got Laura with me today, Laura Kendall, who's going to talk about that and tell you some of the latest evidence that sits around it to assist you with it. The second thing is, when things go wrong, people forget that in this era, if you don't manage communications, it is devastating. So we are going to look at crisis management as part of the governance system, and I've got Richard Amos, who can't be here today, doing a couple of videos giving you the basic structure around crisis management communication. After doing over 350 serious injuries and fatalities, what is the most devastating thing is the harm that is done to families, to affected people around it by co-workers, and the reputational risk and damage that's done to the organisations involved. So I thought it was a really important part because we've got people who are outside the people and culture group, outside of the safety and injury management group along today, to say, this is something I want you to think about. Okay? So we're going to do the same thing we normally do, which is our three buckets of looking at psychological hazards in terms of can we prevent it? Step one. If we can't prevent it, how do we intervene to prevent harm? And unfortunately, where most of us sit after the harm is done, what do we do with the injured person and the damaged world we live in? If I look around the room, the average premium in this room is greater than $1.5 million. That's not great, is it? That's a whole lot of services that simply can't be delivered. And that happens because around about half of that gross loss is psychological claims and will grow. That happens because we fail in leadership. That doesn't happen because of conflict, like people keep thinking. Most of the harm that is being done now is around poor leadership. So we're going to focus a lot on that. I want to thank Mitchell Shire, who didn't get the seats they were after, but for their incredible acting ability, can I just say? So can I have a round of applause for Mitchell Shire? Also from my team who keep putting their heads up and trying to win the academy. They do a great job. I really want to thank them. We've got a number of experts who aren't here. Matt Solder, who's our safety guy, he can't be here, but he's being the WorkSafe inspector on a video. So you get to see Matt in the role he is least comfortable with. It was a lot of fun doing that. He really didn't do well. He needed a few drinks before we started, but I thought he did very well in the end. We've got Richard, as I said, also absent but doing some videos. Tim is going to mix today. Tim is our expert clinical psychologist we use for looking at inherent requirements and actually helping organisations understand causation rather than just treating harm. Remarkable man, but he's going to wander the tables today and he's going to do a brief presentation on neurodiversity so the language is correct and so the understanding is correct and so we move away from, as I said, this pathologising and blaming role into an understanding of perceptual change. I've got Laura Kendall with me, who is a mentor we use inside our own business in neurodiversity to help us make adjustments and make our people be their best self. And I've got Arthur, as always, coming along as the leading person in psychological hazards in Australia, in managing it from the organisational psychologist level. To Found Fiction, the people who are doing all the videography that you'll see today, and remember in a week's time you'll get the video, not of you, don't worry, but of all the videos put together with questions to be asked so that you can use it as a training video going out. So to Toy, who it's a birthday today, I just thought I'd let you know. And to Nassim, thank you very much for doing that. To Nikki and the marketing and administrative team, I can't organise breakfast. So what you're sitting and experiencing today is Nikki and her amazing team doing this. So I do want to say thanks to Nikki because This is a huge amount of work, and the structure of what you're seeing today comes because of her. So if we can give Nikki and a team applause. Finally to you, obviously. It's a long way for many of you to get here, from the tribe and from all sorts of places you've come. It's just magnificent. For me, I came in here about 6, dropped a few things off, went home, listened to my 9-year-old daughter's favourite musician who sings about narcissistic men. And my hope is that she's learning the lessons before she gets a bit older. I naturally went and had coffee and spilled it down the black T-shirt and jeans, and then realised Nikki told me I had to wear a white collared shirt if I wanted to look like a lawyer. But now you've got a black T-shirt, jeans, stained lawyer sitting in front of you, so I failed at the first hurdle. And then I got here and thought, wow, this will be fantastic. So look, thank you so much for coming along. I hope your journey wasn't quite as eventful as mine. What we are going to do now is jump straight into it. So we're going to go and have a look at Richard first, but these guys will be coming back to you at various times. Arthur will come to you after each case study. There is on your table a series of things which you can look at the time. It tells you who's here, but importantly, Arthur's tools for managing psychological hazards are there. And after our first case study, he will take you through those tools on how to use it. Laura will be an internal mentor in the video in the case study as it evolves. So she'll be chatting to Ed Jansen, who is our Tom Daly, who puts on probably the worst Dutch accent I've ever heard, and thought it was funny. So to anyone who is Dutch out there, I apologise in advance, all right? So we'll start off hearing about Ed's journey. Ed is a planner in local government who is neurodiverse, is an incredibly high achiever, and then finds himself in a changing cultural environment without the clarity of what is changing and what are his expectations. So you'll start to see Ed chatting with Laura on a video. You'll start to see how Ed sees the world. Then we'll have a bit of a chat as a group and say, okay, how do we identify neurodiversity in our organisation? Because not everyone's going to put their hand up, and I can understand why they wouldn't. And then what are the changes we should make? And I want you to come back to what good leadership is, which is a compassionate, trust-based leadership where people feel safe to share, and you are trying to get the best out of that person to achieve the best for the organisation. So I think, Freya, on that note, what we might do is we might let Laura and Tim and Arthur have a break and sit down on the tables, and we might just go into the first videos. Take a few notes, okay, if you can. We made sure the paper you can write on, so that was Nikki as well. Isn't that clever? I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have had it nice and shiny, so we can't take any notes. And then let's go from there. That's not a great photo, is it? That's my stomach's really sticking out more than usual. All right, let's go.
Thanks, Andrew. Effective communication during a safety incident is simply an extension of good safety practice. Show empathy, share the facts, demonstrate your values, take control. By following this EFVC method, even teams with limited communications experience can support their organisation, protect their people, and most importantly, maintain trust within their community. When a safety incident occurs, most of us naturally want to protect our people first, stabilise the site, and notify the right authorities. But there's another part of incident response that is just as important: internal and external communication. In local government, our community and stakeholders expect transparency. Our workforce expects reassurance. And our contractors, unions, councilors, and regulators need to understand what's happening. So even before we start thinking and talking about process or reporting, we've got to start with empathy. We have to acknowledge what has happened. We acknowledge who's been affected, and we recognise the concern and uncertainty that incidents can create both inside and outside the organisation. In short, the first step is, the critical question is, what are you communicating about this situation that is human and shows that you're in touch with the human element of this crisis. The second consideration is the facts. Clear and accountable communication is not a nice to have. It's part of good safety practice. Here's why. It prevents misinformation because when people don't hear from us, they naturally fill the gaps themselves. It protects our organisation's reputation, particularly when WorkSafe, unions or the media become involved. It builds trust within the community who want confidence that their local council is acting responsibly. It shows leadership, especially when the facts involve contractors or procurement decisions or other arrangements. And when WorkSafe becomes involved, communication becomes even more critical. They are doing their job, but the community still looks to us for clarity. Our role is to share only confirmed facts. What happened, what we're doing now, and what people can expect next. No speculation, no guesswork, and no blame. The critical question here is, what are the facts of the situation that shapes this crisis and will ensure stakeholders shape this crisis correctly in their minds? WorkSafe presence can add pressure. It can make people nervous about what to say, but good communication is not about defending the organisation. It's about demonstrating our values in action. This means being transparent about the process that WorkSafe will follow, being respectful of injured workers and their families, being consistent in what we say internally and externally, and being supportive of staff who may feel anxious or scrutinised. We don't talk about causes or responsibility. Instead, our communication shows what local government should always show: fairness, accountability, and care for people. In short, the critical question here is, how are you living out your values through this crisis, and how are they consistent with your response to this crisis? The final step in the model, in the EFVC model, is managing the message. Taking control of communications means stepping into a leadership role, even if communications isn't in your hitting zone. Here's what that looks like in practice. One spokesperson, usually your CEO or director, one set of agreed messages developed internally with safety, HR, legal and communications, one version of the facts, verified and approved, clear instructions for staff about what they can say and what they must not say. Even when we don't have all of the information, we can still take control of the narrative. For example, WorkSafe is on site. We are cooperating fully. We will provide further updates when simple information is confirmed. Simple, factual, calm, in control. In short, the critical question here is, what is your organisation doing to take control or appear to be in control of the situation? Finally, incidents involving labour hire or overseas contracting require even more care. These arrangements can attract strong public interest and political scrutiny. Our communication must reflect that we understand our obligations and have acted responsibly. This includes explaining how contractors were engaged, what safety standards and training they were required to meet, what compliance checks the organisation completed, and what immediate steps we have taken to review the contract following the incident. Our job is to communicate our duty of care, our oversight, and the steps we're taking to ensure safety for all our workers, no matter where they come from. Using the EFVC method helps keep communication human, factual, values-driven, and controlled. It ensures our organisation speaks with one voice, supports our people, and maintains the trust of the community we serve. Effective communication is not about perfection. It's about clarity, consistency, and most importantly, care. Thank you.
thank you so much for making a bit of time to meet with me today. This is our first coaching session, so it's probably worth me just saying everything we talk about is confidential. I only pass on information with your explicit permission to others outside of this room. So if you're comfortable, could you tell me a little bit about what's been happening for you at work lately? What's brought us to have this first session together today?
Yeah, things at work are not very good. I've been working on a project for 2 years. It's environmental policy at the council. But we have new bosses come in and they don't understand the importance of it. They want to do new things, and it's hard because I know all this hard work is going to go to waste, and it's very important that we stick to it. But yeah, it's hard.
And when you say it's hard for you, I can see that you're carrying a lot of worry about it, I think. When you say it's hard, what do you mean? How is it hard? How does that play out for you?
Well, the new bosses, I want to just do my work, focus on the initiatives that I've created by myself. A lot of hard work, no one else really understands them. But the new bosses, I don't know, they kind of loudmouth guys, like they don't really understand me, and they want me to do other things, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And what would a good way forward, what would a good resolution to that challenge look like for you?
I don't know. I feel like I need more support around me. I don't know how to tell them. They don't understand. They just want me to do what they want, but it's not right. I don't want to do it. I know that what they want is not the right thing, and I feel pressure from them.
Yeah.
I feel like I need more support, and I don't have it.
That's tough, especially if you're coming up against it every day at work. Yeah. When you say you need more support, what would that look like for you?
I don't know. Usually people let me work. They know that I am the guy in charge of the important stuff, and they leave me alone to work. But now these guys come in and disrupt me when I'm trying to focus on my work, and yeah, I don't know what to do. I just wish they would leave me alone. Mm-hmm.
And what have you tried already? I can see it's on your mind a lot, so you would have thought of some things that you might try.
I just tell them what they want to hear, but I don't really believe it, and I don't know.
Yeah, so that does sound really hard, Ed, if you're coming up against it every day. What are some of the things you've tried already to deal with these challenges?
I mean, I try to tell my supervisor, Jan, but she doesn't really understand what is so hard for me, because I'm not used to dealing with this kind of thing. The new boss is not understanding my work. Usually people leave me alone to work, and they know that I'm the guy in charge, and she doesn't seem to really understand what I'm going through.
Yeah, that's tough.
And she knows me very well. It's annoying.
Have you got anyone at work who understands what you're going through?
No, I don't have many friends at work. I just come in and do the work. That's my job. That's what I like to do.
Yeah. Well, that sounds extra tough if you haven't got a few key supporters around you. Thinking about this situation, have you ever come across a similar situation in your work life in the past? So before you worked at council, have you ever come across this sort of difference of opinions about how to go forward and feeling like people are not understanding your point of view?
Well, I'm not used to working in this kind of environment. Usually I work at the university, people around me, they're smart, they understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, the importance of the work, but I'm not used to these guys that come in. I don't know anything about them. They play football, and I don't understand them. I don't feel like they understand me, but it's hard. It just makes me so angry that they don't know why what I'm doing is so important.
Mm-hmm. And when you're angry, how's that playing out, like when you're at work, but also when you're away from work? How's that anger showing up?
I think about work a lot at home, and it just makes me angry. I just, well, you know, I walk around my house thinking about it all the time, and you know, I'm not a very social guy, but you know, I don't know, I just walk around the house thinking about it all the time and stressing me out. I can't sleep at night. Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
This is hard.
So it's really affecting you.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's important that this coaching that we do together helps to bring about some change. So in the jobs that you've had in the past, before you came to council, and maybe even before this leadership change that you've told me about, Ed, what are some of the things that have helped you to do your best work?
Well, normally my best work, I just go into work by myself and without any disruptions. But you know, Jan usually knows that. I don't know why she's letting me be disrupted like this by these new guys. But yeah, it's really hard and really frustrating. I just want to feel like I can work and you know, I'm supported in my work and you know, be left alone. But now I cannot concentrate. You know, I just feel like I have to answer to these new guys. But you know, if they just leave me alone, I know I can do the work. I've done it many times before. Like I just need to be left alone and undisrupted, and you know, let me do it. You worry about the other things. You know?
Yeah. And I watched a council meeting live stream, and I saw that some of the ways that councillors are speaking about the work of staff, and particularly the planning department, is pretty uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to watch on the live stream. You're saying you want to be left alone. What I heard on the council meeting live stream is that they want a different attitude and a different approach from the planning department, and that's really tricky, I would imagine. Do you think, how realistic do you think it is that you're going to be left alone to do your work going forward? On a scale of 1 to 10.
Well, I don't know. At the moment, it doesn't look like I can even get 10 minutes without someone interrupting me and, you know, disrupting my work. I know what they want, but I don't know how to handle this, and I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest, and I don't know what to do.
Are you doing really basic things like setting up your environment for minimal interruptions? I just heard you talk about getting interrupted every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Are you taking advantage of flexible work options and using quiet rooms when you need to, all those really obvious things?
Yeah, I try to, you know, go into a quiet room when I can, and I, you know, use headphones and listen to classical music, you know, which helps calm me down sometimes.
Great. Yeah.
But yeah, that helps a little bit, but you know, it's still very hard.
Yep. And I think what I'm hearing you say again and again in this conversation is something like the different expectations are not clear to you, and that's creating stress.
Yes.
What do you think would help clarify those new expectations so that you can go back to working pretty autonomously and doing your best work?
I need my supervisor to tell me that what I am doing is the right thing, and I feel free to continue doing that without having to worry about these other guys. I need someone to tell me that.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can just concentrate. But right now there are too many distractions, too many other things to think about, and I just need some clarity.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're talking about distractions a lot. It sounds like there are some things that would be helpful to put into your ways of working and your work environment before you can have those conversations around what are the new expectations and what is it that people want you to do going forward.
What is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity as a term was first coined by an Australian sociologist named Judy Singer in about 1998. And what she was referring to then was an expression around trying to capture the diversity of human experience, that people with diverse brains and diverse minds make up human society, and that much like diversity is seen as essential in ecosystems, perhaps a diversity in human brains and human minds is also essential for useful functioning in society and culture. Now, neurodiversity, some 30 years on, is understood to reflect the idea that there are differences in the way in which human brains on a subtle level
are formed and operate, and human minds on a subtle level are formed and operate. And so it tries to capture the notion that there is a broad range of neurotypical, usual brain structure and functioning, and there is a group of individuals who have diverse structure and functioning to the way their brains and minds work compared with neurotypical people. This is most commonly captured in the diagnoses of autism and ADHD. ADHD is about people who find maintaining their impulse control, stopping themselves doing things, and keeping themselves on track, keeping a plan, being organised, remembering what they're doing, far more difficult than usual. Autism refers to individuals who can experience a couple of different styles of difficulty. One is in the back and forth in social communication, and the second is a range of challenges around finding routine important, and so random or highly flexible environments to be quite provocative, who can find some social environments challenging, and who can find some sensory environments challenging. As a clinical psychologist, I find people come to see me for perhaps three reasons. The first is I'll see individuals who suspect that perhaps they're neurodivergent, that something about their experience of the world means they feel that they're not quite right in their world. Something doesn't fit or sound the same as the way other people explain their own experiences. People who come wondering if a diagnosis is relevant are often quite wary. They want an explanation and understanding of what's going on for them and why they feel the way they do. But they're also concerned about the possibility of a stigma that comes with diagnosis, which is understandable. The second way I end up seeing people who are neurodivergent is through fitness for duty assessments. And that most often occurs when an individual is really having difficulties performing work the way they want to, and that's being highlighted by their manager, but an understanding of what's going on or why is something that the workplace lacks and that the individual hasn't been able to usefully explain so their workplace can hear it. And perhaps the third reason I see people in my clinical practice, for those people, particularly with autism and ADHD, who have found that their experience of getting life working the way they want to be a pretty wearing and tiring one. And so it's not uncommon to see people who have become quite burnt out because of their work experience, or indeed have got issues such as panic attacks related to work or depression more broadly. The common adjustments that I see workplaces needing to make, particularly for individuals with a diagnosis of ADHD and ASD, is almost always about the environment the individual is in. Not so commonly is it about the people that they're working with. That's often a pretty minor concern, if one at all. It's the environments that matter most. Considering ADHD individuals, I'm going to make some stereotypes because I have to at this point in time, but if I'm looking at an ADHD stereotype, ADHD people work best with really clear ideas of what they need to do, brief and regular check-ins to make sure they're staying on track, and environments that provide them with a reasonable amount of stimulation of things they find interesting. That makes an enormous difference to ADHD individuals. Autistic individuals need things that are slightly different. And again, I'm making generalizations. Autistic individuals need clean, simple language. Because the back and forth of language can be a challenge for autistic people, having clear, concise, concrete instructions makes a big difference. Having clear reporting lines makes a big difference. And the one I see that's most important is the sensory environment. Autistic people can find social and office environments overstimulating. And by overstimulating, what I mean is a sense that far too much is happening that is incredibly uncomfortable. So the individual can find themselves feeling overwhelmed, anxious, flustered, and then this enormous effort goes into trying to control that emotional state, which means you can't put your attention and effort into producing the work that you're capable of doing. Regulating that, finding places that are quiet, allowing for noise-cancelling headphones, allowing a balance of work from home versus work from the office, making sure that there are rooms that you can work in quietly and effectively, make a huge difference and are often all that's required for a successful adjustment in the workplace. I mentioned generalising and stereotyping just a moment ago. There's a risk when we talk about neurodiversity or specific diagnoses like autism or ADHD, that we end up talking in stereotypes about what this diagnosis means, or what autistic people, all of them, can do, or what all of them can't do. And the truth of the matter is that there is an enormous diversity within the neurodiversity group, and there's a huge risk of looking at one challenge or one benefit and saying, well, that's everybody. The best thing you can do when you're thinking about a person and making adjustments for the person is think about the person. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their motivations, their tendencies, the individual, not the broad range of symptoms or the stereotypes we have about what someone with ADHD or autism can or can't do. And if adjustments are built around the individual rather than a stereotype, you stand the best chance of that individual knowing that you know them, and then any adjustment you come up with working successfully.
Laura, just to pop up if I can. I'm sorry we've hit you with videos pretty quick, haven't we? But I thought we'd get going because after Laura and I've had a chat, we're going to have Tom. That is the worst Dutch accent, isn't it? I think it's French Dutch, could be Spanish, but whatever it is, the story. I'll give you this.
Thank you.
And I'll turn it on as well.
Double mic'd.
Yeah, you'll be okay. This is a story about Ed being in a council, and the council was a green council. And some development-based councillors got on, and a noise started. And the council then sought to try and adjust and move around their policy and plan. Not surprisingly, Ed was doing the right thing. He was executing the policy and plan. But nobody gave him clarity. He just heard the change was coming. Okay? So what I want to do with Laura really is, in the last 6 months, Laura, there's been 4 really quite detailed reports that have come out around neurodiversity. Probably the one that we've talked about most is the EY report. Can you talk a little bit about what it says about future employment?
For me, what I took away from, there's a report that was released in June, was a worldwide neuro-inclusion study, and it really highlights that those organisations who can move to neuro-inclusive cultures and workplaces are much more likely to thrive in a future of work that's AI enabled, where transformation is a constant imperative, and where the complexity of the work environment continues to increase. And so, do you want me to get a bit specific about what it says?
Yeah, just the big 10.
Yeah, okay. So EY took the 10 most in-demand skills identified by the World Economic Forum as being important between now and 2030. And in their kind of survey methodology, they worked out that neurodivergent professionals really excel in 5 of those skills, like they have really high proficiency. But also that neurotypical professionals are stronger in the other 5. So it really underscores the importance of harnessing neurodiversity and neuroinclusion, because another finding was that the neurodivergent professionals are much more higher skilled when they feel truly included. And happy news is that the biggest factors driving that sense of inclusion amongst neurodivergent professionals that participated in the study was psychological safety, nobody will be surprised by that, and line manager behaviour. So very much in control of managers, leaders and organisations. So for me that was a fascinating report. It really goes to, the other thing that was useful in building this picture was that 75% of the neurodivergent professionals they talked to, and they talked to both neurodivergent and neurotypicals, 75% of the neurodivergent professionals don't feel truly included at work. And so that for me highlights this big opportunity for organisations in drawing out the power of a neurodiverse workforce.
And I guess one of the things that underlies this is we don't have to put a questionnaire in front of people and say, are you neurodiverse?
No.
What leadership about is individualised, compassionate leadership means a person may not know or may not disclose it, but you're dealing with a person, and as they exhibit and explain the things that stress them, you can take from your library of things, your toolkit, actually how to help people. You don't have to call them neurally diverse. You can just say, this person functions best in this way.
That's right. You don't need a diagnosis.
Laura and I did, and we'll get it out to you in the next week, a podcast which goes for about 20 minutes examining the EY study to talk about exactly what it did say and what are the learnings from that. And it's called The Verdict, and we'll send it out to you in the next week. But I guess for Laura and I, the thing that stands out about the EY study is the importance of senior leaders driving psychological safety and line managers having capability and skill in managing. And I think for all of us...
expected to manage it.
I think for all of us that's a huge task, isn't it? We've got a whole lot of very senior leaders who believe in psychological safety but don't know what that looks like. And we've got a whole lot of supervisor manager levels who are technically highly competent but really struggle around people and behaviour. So you can see we're a long way away from where we need to be, and I think as Laura comes and talks to you more as we go around the room, the solutions are incredibly simple. They're not hugely expensive, are they, Laura? They are about engagement.
Yeah, so it's a big shift that we need, but once you understand how to make the shift, it's pretty simple. I won't say it's easy because it's a shift, but it's simple, yeah.
All right, now what we're going to do now is Tom, with his worst accent, is going to reflect briefly about what it feels like, and then we're going to go to the tables. You've heard a lot about neurodiversity, and then we're going to go back to you and say, all right, how do I manage people in my environment who are neurally diverse? What am I doing? What are the things? I don't want you to come out and create a list. I just want you to have the discussion amongst yourselves about how these issues present to you, what you think about Tom and where he is, what would be a good solution. There's no right answer because that's not what we're after at this stage. We're after the conversation because then we're about to go into the case study after that where you get to see it unravel. Okay, thanks so much.
Yep.
All right, over to Tom for his last show, I think. Hi, Tom. Can you tell us what's going on, mate?
Well, things are not good at work. These two new guys have come in and they really don't understand what I'm doing, the importance of the work I'm doing. They are trying to get me to stray from the policy and the project that I know is so important, and it's really, it's really pissing me off. It's affecting me.
And this is different from before, is it? Is it change of council and CEO? What is the change?
Yes, the old CEO, he resigned. He's not there anymore. They have a new guy, Harvey, I think his name. They also, these two new councillors come in and, they really do not understand what we are doing and they want to go a different way. And it really annoys me. All my hard work, I understand the importance of the work I do, but they don't get it. They want to go a different way. And yeah, I don't know. It's really, really frustrating.
Tom, you've made an appointment to come and see me today because you're concerned that pressures are being brought to bear on you in respect to Lance's planning application. Can you expand on that for me a bit?
Yes, well, the application is, I know what to do. I do the work as usual. I was brought here to carry out the policy and I do that. Everybody knows that, what I do is important and I'm the guy who understands what needs to be done. But the people around the council now that they want to go a different way and I really don't know what to do about it. I don't believe in their new direction, but, it's really frustrating and, I just want to go back to what I was brought here to do and, I wish people would support me in that.
Now, Tom, the email that you sent me talked about your immediate supervisor and people around you seeking to influence how you responded to an application that you should and will reject. Can you explain in a bit more detail what are those concerns that you have?
Well, I think the new application, it really deviates from the policy in a way that I cannot support, and I you know, the people around me are trying to get me to, you know, agree to this thing, but I don't want to. It really pisses me off that I'm being pressured in this way, and I just wish they would let me go the way that I know what to do. That's why I was brought here, and, you know, I'm the expert in this field, and I think the way they are pressuring me is just not acceptable.
They say, as I've spoken to them, that they're not asking you to change your rejection, but the language in which you do that rejection, so that Lance and the relevant counsellor don't feel so offended. What's your response to that?
Well, why does it matter if I offend somebody? This is the reality, and I need to say it how I feel. I don't know. I don't see why I care about what this person thinks.
And as these people place this pressure, is it clear to you what they want, or is it more of an impression that they're trying to influence you? What is it?
I think it's, I know that they want me to, I can tell from the way they try to, you know, like, sort of manipulate me in a way, but I really don't want to give in to them, because, you know, I really don't care what, you know, if somebody is offended. I don't, this is my work, and I don't want to deviate from it.
I want you to think about a problem that we have. We've got rate capping. We've got counsellors who are straying from policy and plan. Now, nothing's new about that, is there? There's nothing new particularly about that. So we have less money to do more. Do you agree? And as we come to do something, our obligation as officers within council is to execute the plan and the policies, isn't it? Now, all of you at different times have felt that pressure to move sideways when you know what the rule is. But you know, by the way, you saw how bad my acting is. I stopped calling him Ed and started calling him Tom. and for that, Ed, Tom, I'm really sorry. I'm a bad actor and I'm not win the award. At our Christmas dinner, we're handing out awards for our actors. I won't get one. So what I want you to do for 5 minutes is to think. You know now a bit of the backstory, and then we're going to go and read the first case study. But I want you to think now. You've seen Ed, he constantly says the same thing. You've seen Laura draw out what are the opportunities. You've heard Tim describe what are the adjustments that could be made. I want you to think, knowing who Ed is in this, if you were the boss, what would you be saying to Ed? There's a change on its way. There's a change in the air. What are the things that you'd be saying to Ed to give him that level of comfort? Because he must comply with the policy and he must comply with the plan, but we want some flexibility from him, because the world is a place of communication, isn't it? And how it lands is how it's done. So if you don't land it well, you have more conflict, don't you? So can you just take 5 minutes? We'll wander around, have a chat, do the best you can, and then we'll get into the case study and we'll start working a lot harder after that. Well, this is great discussion, but can I just summarise something very quickly?
Yeah.
We have a supervisor who doesn't have an authority
They said that too.
because they don't feel safe. That's the
okay,
reality,
that's a
isn't it?
clarification.
You've got someone who's trying to massage a message, doesn't know what good looks like, is unable to define it, and the person underneath who wants clarity can't get it because the supervisor doesn't know what good looks like.
There you go.
So part of what we're talking about with psychological hazards is two parts. We can't build the skills of supervisors. It's a waste of money if we don't have leadership buy-in.
So that
Councils are easy. Policy, plan, execution. That's it.
so easy.
But we see constantly moving parts, don't we? Things that move away from that. Impressions that this is what people want at a council level. That's why councils are so complex, okay? But if we don't authorise and support supervisor level, the people who are working for them will never, ever feel safe in change, will they? So look, I just want to chuck it out there as a start. Now what I want you to do is there is a case study in front of you. You've got a document. You've actually got lots and lots of documents when I think about it. But you do have a document which has a lot of faces on it, which are very impressive faces. Then we've got Arthur's tools, and Arthur's going to come and explain those tools to you a little bit later. But what I want you to do is to go to case study 1, because you've heard parts of this story already. Have a read for about 3 or 4 minutes, then have a bit of a discussion around it, and then we're going to jump straight into it, okay? So you've got 5 minutes to read, and then we start going into the exciting stuff, okay? We start getting the CEO coming along on the video and talking to you about what they're going to do. We start seeing the new counsellor, okay? Then we see the new supervisor. So it starts to unravel a bit. So have a read, and I'll be back in about 2 or 3 minutes, then we're off on the video, okay? All right.
Yes.
What we're going to do now is I want you to think about what you've done. At the end of this, once you've heard a bit more evidence, what I'm going to do is get you to think about, so what were the adjustments that should have been made, what was the nature of the risks that were there. But for the moment, let's get on and hear what the new CEO thinks he should do in respect of the councils and move from there.
The past CEO enjoyed popular support for the climate agenda. However, with the election of pro-development councillors with significant community clout, we as officers will need to be more nuanced in our approach and reporting. Confrontation would be divisive and destructive and cause staff to be drawn between the battle lines of warring councillors, and the safety of my staff is paramount.
The woke ways of the past are gone. Investment in gang-along has withered on the vine under past councils' hunger to be socially responsible and has caused a talent drain, low investment, and higher unemployment. The past council's agenda aligns with the planning department's own politics. Despite a changing of the guard, they undermine the new imperative. Ed was an extraordinarily clever young man.
I'm an officer at the council, and my duty is to uphold the policies and procedures. I supervise Ed, but also I report to Nina Cosgrove. Ed is an extraordinarily clever young man, but he does have some impersonal quirks, like he avoids eye contact, he can be intense, and he definitely prefers to work alone. But his work is clever, intuitive, well-researched, but he does struggle when it comes to disagreements with others, and he does tend to walk away instead of addressing it. Ed created the Urban Database, which is a technology-driven tool to address climate and sustainability issues. It's AI-driven, and it's very successful as it's been used nationally with urban planners.
Ed, you started work at Gangalong City Council after completing a Masters of Urban Planning Design at Monash University.
Yes.
Yeah. The offer that was made by the then CEO, Harvey Hales, was to engage you in developing sustainable work plans around urban planning. And as a result of that, you drafted a document called Sustainable Approach to Urban Planning in Gangalong. Do you recall that?
Yes, that's my design.
Yeah. And that became the master plan for urban planning in Gangalong and was supported and voted in by council.
Yes, my design was very well received.
Yeah. And so both the policy and plan that sits around urban planning is drawn from this document that you created.
That's correct, yes.
Yes. Now there was a change in 2023 where there was a change of councillors. Do you recall that change and what was occurring?
Yes, this Kevin and Joe, they came in and things felt a little bit different, but I just kept working.
Yeah. Kevin was the new councillor and he brought with him a cohort of other 2 or 3 councillors, not sufficient to change the plan, but they had a loud voice which was not positive towards climate change and sustainability.
Yes, I mean, I don't really get involved with that stuff too much, I just focus on my work, but I could tell that things were changing a little bit. Jan has always supported me, but I don't know, I just felt a little bit more isolated, and the things were a little bit different, maybe not as supportive of what I was doing.
Yes. So Jan Elias was your manager. Joe Scott was the CEO. My understanding is you felt that they sought to appease what were called these anti-woke councillors. A lot of the messaging suggested that they were not pushing back hard, but still staying on course.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to describe for me because I don't really get involved with that stuff too much. But I did feel as though people weren't supporting what I was doing, and they were sort of going along with this new ideas these guys that brought in. Yes.
So as that change happened, I gather it was relatively quick, the change that occurred. Did anyone spend time with you to describe any change in council narrative or views?
No, none of that. No one told me anything. I can sort of just have a feeling that something is wrong, or something is changing. I don't know, but it's been hard for me. Jan is still good to me. She's still quite supportive, but I don't think it's the same as what it was. She now, I feel like she avoids my questions. I want to talk about the plan. She kind of runs away from me. I don't know. I feel this like.
And how does that make you feel inside? What does that make you feel like?
Well, it's very frustrating. I find it harder to concentrate. I don't really know who to go to anymore. I feel quite alone, and which is fine. I'm used to that, but it's hard. When I have questions, I need things done, and I don't feel like I don't know who to talk to about it. So, it's very stressful.
Thank you.
Now, I might get Laura for a few questions about notice, but can you see at the moment where we're up to in this? This is a stage where we could use prevention. Okay, remember my 3 buckets? What are our policies? What are our processes? What are the leadership skills we exercise? At this stage, there is no harm. Okay, so there is an opportunity to prevent, and that requires us making adjustments. And what I want you to remember is when we talk about neurodiversity or any other issue, I make adjustments every day for different people in my office, not because they've got a diagnosis, but because they're different. Does that make sense? People make a lot of adjustments for me because I'm very different, okay? But my point about it is that if we want to be great at what we do, if we want to be good humans, and ultimately I don't think there's anyone here who doesn't, our first rule is to listen, yeah? To reflect and to listen, and then to discern what is the way that I achieve the best with the people I've got. But I have limitations because of my environment, okay? And when you sign up for a job, don't you? You can't say, well, I'm here, but I can't do it. So that's why I thought we'd get Laura to say, look, you've now heard Ed in all these different languages. You notice he switched language this time? Every time we do it a week apart, his language changes, but nonetheless, whoever he is, just listen to how simple it is to make the adjustments from Laura's point. Laura, over to you.
Perfect. So thinking about supporting an employee like Ed through a period of change, there are some things obviously that are the same as for all employees. It's still really important to have a clear and structured plan, to have early proactive communication, and it's still really important to have that two-way dialogue and to explain how the changes affect each employee's role. For employees like Ed, that two-way dialogue is particularly important, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but one thing that is coming through again and again in this case study is about role responsibilities, right? So people are talking about there's a vibe of change, we want a different direction, we want a different approach from the planning department. For someone like Ed who's really struggling with ambiguity around that, it would be helpful to go as far as or it could be helpful, we don't know him really as a person, but it could be helpful to go as far as sitting down with him to do a review of his position description and looking at the elements that say, report to the council or provide advice to the council on blah, 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 and add in some elements that address considering different viewpoints or, the sort of nuances that he is going to have to grapple with. That needs to be made explicit for Ed in his role description, in the team charter, in those sort of really concrete artefacts.
So, Laura, just on that, it happens all the time when we write to different clients, we write based on who the recipient is. Does that make sense? I don't just have a method by which I write. I don't think that Ed at this early stage, before his sort of limbic stage has gone crazy, I don't think that Ed at this stage would be offended to say, look, you're reporting to council, and to be heard, we need to message it in this manner. Are you fine with that? I think at this stage, before he buys into it,
good point.
he'd hear it and go, can you give me some ideas about what that language would look like? And you would give him assistance with the language, but it has to come from him.
That's right. And so sitting down and first time you're working with a new council and writing a report for them, say, sitting down and really planning that report and talking through those issues beforehand would be really helpful. Jan, as Ed's manager, probably knows Ed's preferred communication channel. So it's really important in change to use all your normal communication channels and also those of employees like Ed, whose influence during the change can be make or break.
So can I use an example of that? One of the mistakes here would be to write an email saying, Ed, I need you to do the following.
Yeah.
Okay, isn't that one of the favourite techniques of leadership? I'll send you an email where I want you to do something different. Not a good idea.
It's not enough.
And it's too early. It's personal first.
Back up, and then, again, it costs nothing to offer some really structured social support to employees like Ed. So things like thinking about, has he got a buddy or mentor? Does he need a new one who can help explain the new power dynamics in the new landscape and save him the cognitive load of trying to guess unwritten expectations, because that's really hard for folks like him. Managers, of course, should be having regular scheduled check-ins. The scheduled part is important for someone like Ed. But during change, using those check-ins to proactively check about how he's experiencing the change is great. And using those conversations as an opportunity to involve someone like Ed in the change. So really tapping into his niche ability to analyse things and come up with different solutions or deal with problems that might come up during the transition to working with a new council would be a really good idea. And educating new colleagues when there's a change in a working environment. If you've got someone, at this stage we don't have any diagnosis for Ed, we don't need one, but we do know that we've got neurodiversity in every workforce, in every council. So it's really important to educate all colleagues, including councillors, about neurodiversity and what respectful conduct looks like. They may not all take it on, but it's really important to do it anyway, at least to create a sort of a critical mass, a few people who can understand that there are neurodiverse people in the workforce and accept them and acknowledge that and take a supportive stance. So again, none of those cost anything, they just take a little bit of thinking and doing.
All right, well look, Laura, that's fantastic. One thing I'd like you to say is, do you see where Joe, Joe, for some of you will know from Whittlesea days, Joe was the appointed CEO under administration at Whittlesea. Joe, if he was here today, and he can't be here today, would say his first presentation wasn't the best he's done. Because he'd say to you, in dealing with councillors, you don't do it corporately, you deal with it individually the moment an issue arises, and you explain what was wrong in relation to the code, behaviours that are expected, and the impact it would have, and you stay close to that person. Yes, you train other people, but you don't try and do it globally. You deal the moment it comes up. What you never do with councillors is wait till the problem is alive, because then the politics of council take it over. So now that I've told you, I've let the cat out of the bag a little bit. What I want you to do is to try and, thanks very much too, Laura, sorry, I'm doing staring like a shag on a rock. What I want you to think about now is, you've heard what Laura said, and she's just great at this stuff, but I want you to, as a table, think about, okay, if you were Jan, what were the adjustments you would make? Then I want you to think a little bit about, how are we going to manage councillors who don't behave well? Now, I know you might think that's not my job, because I'm not the CEO. The legislation really does say the CEO. But how do we arm the CEO with the support and knowledge of the risk that's occurring? Because remember, at the executive level, they confront this weekly. They're not understanding the impact it's having downstream. They're actually living and sometimes almost dying, being part of that conflict at a council level. But commonly it's downstream where the harm is being done, okay? So I want you to think about what is the correct method. And I've told you what Joe would say is part of it. And then I want you to think generally, what are the hazards and risks that you see as a group are emergent for Ed and his staff, okay? So take your time, have a discussion, and then we'll come back and then I'll get Arthur to come up and give me a hand and we'll answer a few questions and tell you what we think the answer is, okay? Go. Alright, how are we going? Good?
I'm walking.
Lots of really interesting discussions going around.
Love it.
What I thought I might do is throw to Arthur very quickly on where our hazards and risks are, where he sees some of the solutions could be in this, because we're at the prevention stage. Arthur, over to you. Give it a shot.
Thank you. Thank you. You can see it starts to get a little complex, and I've gone around to a couple of tables and where we're thinking about various elements. We're thinking about what does it mean at an organisational level, what does it mean at a leader level, being Jan, but we're also thinking about Ed at the individual level as well. So we constantly need to think through the three layers when we're assessing hazards and determining the risk associated with the hazards as well. So that's one simple way to frame the thinking. Are we thinking across those three areas? But you'll also see in your document, and am I allowed to share?
Yeah, sure.
Online for
Just this time.
structuring thinking to help us through this. So if you open up one of the documents, which is the one with our
Case studies.
amazing photos.
There's many of those things. So it's the case study one you've got. So if you go to the front of the case study, you'll see the amazing photos, and then you'll see Arthur's magic drawings.
Which is this one here, and the slide prior to that looks at all the hazards. So we're ultimately assessing the hazards first. Actually, I'll go back a notch. It might just step us through. If we go back to this, now we've got the psychosocial regs. They go live on the 1st of December. This is the model we need to be following when we're assessing hazards and risks. So clearly, we want to be looking at the hazard, then assessing the risk associated with the hazard. Because you can have a hazard, it may not necessarily be a risk. So we've got to make some determination around the risk associated with that hazard. And then we start.
Can I just jump in on the risk? Just remember, when you're assessing risk and psychological hazards, there's one extra element. It's just not frequency and consequence, it's also duration.
Correct.
So I just want you to remember there's an extra element in the risk assessment. Sorry.
No, you're right. Frequency, duration, and consequence, impact, and consultation sits within that. And you see the wrap around that circle as well. That's a must requirement within that. And that's the model we want to be following. And if you turn over the page, and if I'm just aligning with the Victorian Codes of Practice, there are 15 psychosocial hazards that have been identified. They're pretty much the same across the country, slight variations. So you see to the right, that's the white there, often the hazards we're looking for, the most common ones, but the big unique ones as well. And we'll see some of these in this particular case study. But what I want to draw your attention to, and Andrew's been talking about the buckets, just to the left of that, you'll see the how. And there's 7 workplace focus areas that we can be considering. Those 3 buckets are prevention, protection, and support. Under prevention, we've got leadership, culture, work design. Protection, we've got coping and resiliency and early intervention. And support recovery. How do we support people on their recovery journey? And then awareness sitting along across all of those areas. And it's a really good way to frame and assess the various controls that might be needed as you're unpacking this particular case study. And just going around the tables, you can hear we're playing a lot in that leadership, culture, and work design. So culturally, what sits under that? Feeling psychologically safe to speak up, and we've already touched on that. Change sits within that, how we're communicating the change, and what does that look like? At an org level, leader level, individual level, in amongst that, policies, procedures. Then we've got things like work design that sit within that. We spoke about role clarity earlier, that was given some attention, or it could be the way Ed works and what the requirements are to support Ed in his role there. And if you've got leadership, we've got leadership up the top there as well. What does Jan actually need to better support Ed on this journey? So you can see with these 7 focus areas, and there's more detail on the page over that just expands on those 7. It's a really helpful way to help you frame your thinking as you progress through the case study and go, what are the buckets we need to be filling within this area? And you might be thinking about them through 3 lenses, organisational, leadership, and individual level, because they'll look different in each of these areas. And a number of the risks have already been highlighted.
So can I, just picking up on what Arthur said, change is difficult at any time, isn't it? I mean, I've been through a lot. We're now in the 4th major historical change, aren't we? We're going through a period of the way intellectual property interferes and regulates our life in a way which is very different. But the hardest change to deal with is diffuse change, unspoken change. So who owns the change in this process? Clearly the CEO, to communicate what are the changed expectations around communication. Not to say don't follow the plan. In fact, to say you must follow the plan until it's changed, you've got to follow the plan. Don't not follow the policies, you must. But we are communicating in a different world, and good communication looks like this. You see where our problems come? Because every time, whether you're in a council or not, and you deal with new leadership, you're always trying to guess what good looks like. And the owner of good is the CEO. And then the ELT that comes under it and says, now we understand what good looks like in our group. Can you see why Joe was wrong at the beginning? He had to define what was good. He had to bring his ELT into the game. And the people beneath the ELT had to be safe to say, the reason we're doing this is, it will not change us being good, it will change how we evidence good, how we describe good. Then we'd have no problems with Ed, would we? So that organisational part is absolutely critical. And you've dealt with, we've had wonderful lessons about how we help Ed, but what Arthur's identified clearly is the problem that's here is much bigger than what's happening with Ed, isn't it? All right, that's morning tea. Go, about 20 minutes. There's been a question asked that it's such a good question I want to answer it. There is a view that exists with employment lawyers that if a person raises an issue about what is different about them without a formal diagnosis, that you don't have to do anything about it. Okay? Beside that being as dumb as dog shit, it's also wrong at law. Okay? Because the obligation under safety law for an organisation to do everything that is reasonably practical, identify the hazard. The person has told you the hazard. And let's use an example, menopause. The person has told you they're struggling. Do you ignore that hazard? Under the safety law, that's toothbrush territory, that's off to jail. Okay? What is the level of risk that comes to that person in being managed inappropriately? Harm. Okay? It's a high level. So if I use menopause as an example, I apologise for doing it, but it's the example that's least used and deserves to be spoken about. If I don't provide the person with the adjustments and the flexibility, I know I will harm them. I know that. You're starting to hear the words reckless endangerment starting to sneak into this conversation. I'm aware of a high risk and I'm indifferent to it. It really is done, isn't it? So once I've identified the hazard, determined the level of risk, and I know it's high, then I must institute a control to prevent the harm. That's the standard of care to provide a safe workplace, to ensure the person is appropriately supervised, to have systems, and to monitor the person's health. And since 2014, Burke and Suncorp has said quite clearly in case law But a person doesn't have to tell you if a reasonable person observing the person would understand that they have some form of problem that affects their capacity to undertake the inherent requirements of the job. So the next time somebody puts their head up and says something as stupid as that, just turn the lights out, whack them, turn the lights back on and say, oh, I wonder what happened then. Okay? All right. Now, you've got case study number 2. It's a bit longer. It's a bit more exciting. Okay? Read it. And then we get Mitchell Shire Council. Live on video. They're sitting at this table, by the way, just in case you don't know who they are. Some of the best acting I've seen in a long time. Okay, now what's going to happen is you're going to get a video of Merle, who is a friend of Ed's. You're going to get a co-worker called Kendra. So you're going to get 3 or 4 together. Kendra, Pat, who is a past manager, Nikki, head of governance. Okay, start off with a friend, then the next 3. And then you're going to find out the CEO is appointed an investigator. And you'll get a short video on what's going to be investigated. Then you're going to have a little one from Joe. So you've got a bit of a telly show coming up for a while, but it's all important because you've got to answer the questions. Then it's off to table discussion. So I know this is a bit of a longer part, but this is the base of the study because this is the place where you start to see stuff that all of you have complained to me of during time about where intervention didn't occur when the problem was obvious. And the idea of this is to show you the level of impact that is arising and how other people saw what was happening. One of the things that happens when things goes wrong is they end up on my table and the person's been damaged. And I'm like a pathologist. I've come in after it's all over. So here you can see multiple opportunities to intervene. None of them taken. Okay? So let's have a go. Let's have the videos roll. Hang in. I know they're a bit long, but Mitchell Shire Council, just, I mean, how good is that? You don't get actors like that every day. And then I'll be back, okay?
G'day Mel, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Good, thanks, Andrew.
Now Mel, you're the owner of the Three Moons Cafe, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
We spoke earlier about the friendship you developed with Ed. Could you talk about how that began?
Yeah, look, it is a bit tough for me at the moment. But look, Ed used to come into the cafe. You know, he ordered the same coffee, piccolado every morning, and I don't know, he felt quite shy and almost abrupt, but I ended up building a really good rapport with him, and he would come in and we'd have great chats, and, you know, on occasions I would actually have a break and sit down and have a good chat, and, you know, we would talk all things climate and sustainability. He actually gave me some really great ideas just for my home to help pay my bills. You know, it's really hard running a business. So, yeah, we had a great friendship.
Yeah. Now, that took about 6 months to build that level of friendship.
Yeah. He was a hard nut to crack. But, you know, I could tell that he wanted to talk to me. He found it really hard to just make that eye contact. You know, he would almost be hesitant to start a conversation, but once he started, I could tell he wanted to keep talking. But, you know, the pressures of a cafe and people lining up. And that's why, you know, I would take time to sit down and have my break with him because there was just a connection I just had.
Now, you said in our earlier discussions that changed, that who he was, that more generous soul, you noticed a change after about 6 months. What was that?
Look, he would come in and it was almost like he was a little bit abrupt, to be honest. And initially I thought, what have I done? Have I upset Ed? I was thinking maybe he had a crush on me and, you know, he could tell I wasn't interested because I'm married. But I don't know. I think obviously it was work pressures had got to him. And yeah, very, very withdrawn, come in, just grab his coffee. And, you know, every time I'd say, hey, you ready to have a chat? No, I've got to go. I've got too much on at work. So I could tell things were...
Did he mention what the pressures were at work?
Just workload. And he made a couple of comments, you know, politics, always politics. So, I don't know. I guess it just had to do... I think he used to write a lot of reporting, you know, for capital projects in that space. So, you know, I'm just assuming that, you know, maybe it was those types of workload pressures.
And what was the last time? Can you describe the last time you saw him?
Very hard because, you know, I might get a bit emotional. He came in, he ordered his coffee and he just said, I'll see you later, maybe a lot later. And he looked defeated. His head was down. He didn't make contact with me. And yeah, look, that was the last time I saw him.
Thanks very much, Mel.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I know this is an uncomfortable time. All of you at different times have either worked with Ed or knew Ed, and we're now dealing in the days after Ed's passing to try and gain some reflection and some understanding, some signposts along the way where we saw things that could have been done different, how we could have prevented what occurred. And I guess also particularly for Kendra and for Pat as well, who are quite close to Ed, just to understand and give you an opportunity to talk about how you feel. And from this, hopefully, we can go back and learn as a council. So maybe, Nikki, can I just go to you first? Nikki, you've been head of governance for a number of years and you've had several different councils brought together. The council before this convened around about 9 months ago was a council which was a strongly green council. It was had its problems, didn't it? Had individual personalities which were quite big, and that had challenges for you managing people to stay within the rules and the code of conduct.
Definitely.
Yeah. What changed? Can you remember?
Look, I think there's a number of factors that have led us to where we are today, and it's been a challenge. It's been a very challenging time. We are engaged with a very different kind of council these days. There's almost an air of celebrity, you might say, within the community. So I think that, you know, it's been a real challenge for the CEO to kind of direct behaviours and things like that. And unfortunately, my role is, you know, being able to direct the information and the way that councillors communicate with our staff just hasn't.
No, and Kev is bigger than life. When I interviewed him earlier, he's a big personality, isn't he?
Definitely. Definitely has a lot of sway in the community and is very vocal about the things that he feels are good for our community. So he has a lot of support, you know, his football background, things like that. Can
I talk to you a little bit about code of conduct, Nikki? You know, you're the owner in some ways of being head of governance. There's the usual, as the new councillors come in, there's the 2-day training which deals with code of conduct. But the lapses here were significant, weren't they? The code of conduct breaches came quick and fast, didn't they?
Very quick and fast, yes. And I think we're a growing community and a growing shire, and I think there's some, I guess, expectations put on the councillors to develop and things like that. And unfortunately, that short period of time when we're inducting councillors clearly hasn't gotten through.
One of the things that concerns me is the policy and the master plan that sit behind planning are immutable documents. They're not things you can go sideways. A council officer, whether it's Kendra, whether it's Ed, if they're asked to review an application that sits against it, they don't have a level of autonomy. They have to apply it, don't they?
Exactly. And look, it was a dedicated team member, well respected by his peers for his background in sustainability and things like that. He was a go-to person and very passionate about following those guidelines that are put in place for a reason. And I just still can't believe we've ended up here.
Yeah. Kendra, you've heard what Nikki has said about her concerns in governance terms, the way councillor conduct started to creep down even into your level. We're here because of Ed and what has happened with Ed. Can you tell us a little bit about your first impressions of Ed?
Ed was a very quiet gentleman. He had a great attention to detail and he was inflexible. Sometimes he would follow policy and would be unwavering in that regard. He was very, very passionate about what he did. He was a very quiet guy that, you know, I remember for my birthday. So I didn't tell many people that it was my birthday, and I come to work and there was a present on my desk and Ed quietly come over to me and said, "Happy birthday." So he was very lovely. And he just, really liked the environment.
Can I just, you talked about inflexibility, but that's something obviously you got around, wasn't it?
It was.
But that was the first impression?
It was the first impression. So, at first, he's difficult to get to know, but once you start to know him and talk to him a bit more, he dropped his guard around.
Mm. Pat, you used to be his manager before all this happened, so you moved on to a more senior role, but you've heard what Kendra said. When you first met Ed, what was your impression and how did you manage those differences with Ed?
Well, I was on his interview panel, so when I interviewed him, I thought he's going to be a hard egg to crack, but I think he will fit well into our team. We might have to make some minor adjustments for his personality because he did seem a bit withheld and didn't show all his true colours to start with.
But there was something about him that you liked, though, wasn't it? He had real talent.
Yes. No, I saw myself, my younger self, in Ed, and I thought he would be a great fit for our team. Like I said, might be a bit challenging getting his personality to fit in with what we already had, but I thought, no, he'll be great. He sticks to the rules, so we definitely need that in the planning department. And he was going to, if I gave him a task to do, I knew he was going to get in there, get it done. So, and to the best quality that he could possibly do.
Now, he liked structure, didn't he? And when he worked with Kendra, they had this very complimentary sort of thing. Kendra would be out there chatting to people and making things happen, and he would be actually building the infrastructure behind it.
They bounced off each other. Yin and yang they are, but their personalities. But it just worked. Like, they just gelled. It was just fantastic to watch them grow together, and it's so tragic what's happened to Ed. I'm so disappointed.
I know. Now, Kendra, you saw a change, didn't you?
I did.
Can you tell us, this was in the application for Lance, wasn't he, where he sought to develop a river region,
yes,
which was contrary to the master plan and the policy, and you were helping Ed on the report. Can you remember what happened about that time?
He just become really disengaged. He seemed really frustrated. He would come to work and he just seemed different. He seemed more tired. His personality changed. And
now, you raised this with Jan, didn't you? And
I
you're
did.
aware of the pressure that was being brought to bear on him to create nuance or to create a nicer feeling about the rejection of the application. And Ed had spoken to you about that quite a lot, hadn't he? And what was his views about that?
He was unwilling to change a report. He thought it went against policy, and that was it. It went against policy and it went against his values to change something that...
And I think from our discussions, your concern was that Jan didn't pick up on the warning signs. She didn't see that what she was trying to do. He didn't get. He didn't know what she was trying to do. He just felt this pressure coming towards her. and she's a bit unrelenting in it.
Yes, I think the approach was incorrect. Yes.
Yeah. Kendra, you saw Ed becoming distressed, and you saw the manner in which Jan was pushing without any clarity to try and get Ed to do things, and you saw his reaction became quite profound. When you need to move Ed to a place away from where he's comfortable, tell us what you do.
So Ed needed structure and clarity with things, and so if I had a verbal conversation with Ed that he may not have understood, what I would do is I would go away and write it in an email. I would double check that email to make sure that I'm understanding what it said, and then I would send it to him so that he could ponder it in his own time, and then he would, follow it. Like, then he would come back to me after reading the email, and then would be able to, get to the same ground.
But clarity and candour were the two words for him, weren't they?
They really were.
Yeah. If he thought you were being disingenuous, if he thought you weren't being truthful with him, and that was your experience too, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It had to be straight and honest with Ed, and he liked to be told exactly how it was.
Yeah.
He didn't pick up hints at all.
No hints. Can I just say, Kendra, you copied in on some of these emails that came from outside, from Lance, but particularly from Kev, where the whole urban planning department were copied in with criticisms of decisions that were made. How did you feel, and how did you see that impact Ed?
A great deal. I saw it impact Ed a great deal. He just become so disengaged and frustrated with the whole thing.
Now, the same thing for you, Nikki. This is where you really got involved, wasn't it? Because the CEO stepped back. How did you feel about the CEO stepping back at that time?
If I can be quite frank, it was just extremely frustrating. I mean, we need to support our staff, and nobody deserves to be spoken to in that way. And this is not the appropriate communication channel.
Because you do have a portal, don't you? If there's issues which need to be dealt with, you've got a portal.
We have a councillor portal where all of, any questions or concerns need to go via that portal. And it's our job as the officers to communicate with the staff on the ground.
And you saw Kev doing these circular emails with a number of people, often identifying people, often with anger and capital letters and all of those types of things. You saw him entering in and speaking directly to ELT members and sometimes staff beneath them, and including going to the urban planning department, exploding one day. You saw all those things happen, and you raised it with Joe, who's the CEO, and what was his response?
Look, I guess I can only do so much in my capacity. Yes, I'm the head of governance, but at the end of the day, I also report to the CEO, which really I felt quite powerless. I raised my concerns to him, and he assured me that he would take it up with them.
And he did, didn't he? In a collective way, but he didn't do it individually. He'd go back and talk about the code of conduct and what the expectations. You actually did a presentation for them to refresh.
A refresher on our code of conduct and how to communicate. Yeah.
Can I ask you, and I'll just go around the room, if there was one thing that could have been done differently, and you might not be able to answer it, but if there was one thing, one turning point or one change in behaviour from you with the CEO, what would be the one thing he could have done, you think, which would have prevented this?
Look, I think he could have acted much sooner. Anybody could see that we were dealing with a very different kind of council, and that they really needed to be put in their place and understand the way we expect them to work, the same way they expect us to work from the get-go.
Yeah. For you, Kendra, what's the change that you felt we'd still have Ed here today if that change had have occurred?
It's so difficult to say. Ed was not the sort of person that would reach out and ask for help. So I don't know what we could have done.
I guess the thing for you, Kendra, that you've suggested is, who knows what Jan was trying to communicate?
Well,
but
yes.
Certainly if she had have adopted the rules that Pat had used before, which is listening, providing clarity, providing room for thought, those types of things may have changed Ed to a place which could have worked for both sides, but that didn't happen, did it?
It didn't.
Yeah. Pat, you knew Ed, you were Ed's boss. you've heard everything, particularly from Nikki and Kendra, harmful and hurtful things. For you, what was the learning? When you left Ed, you felt safe that Ed was good. What's the thing you think that changed after hearing all this?
Yeah, I gave Jan quite a good handover, I thought, and I'm not saying that she wasn't the best manager for that job either, but I feel like she didn't take that handover on board. She didn't really listen to how I thought Ed could best be managed. I mean, I gave her feedback on all of the staff that she would be managing going ahead. So, yeah, I don't think that she was able to manage Ed the way that Ed needed to be managed. Like I said, he needed that structure. He needed to just be told straight and honest and just let him get on with his job. He needs that quiet time, but then he does need to bounce off like Kendra every now and again. Like, you just give him a bit of space, let him get on with it, and you will see him absolutely shine. Well, I did, unfortunately. We won't see that anymore.
Right. Thank you very much.
I saw no reason not to back Nina and Jan in their follow-up with Ed. They both know him well as supervisors. I appreciate that Ed encountered difficulty with the changed communication style of new councillors and their pro-development views, being a significant departure from current planning policy. In my view, Nina and Jan were just trying to suggest a softening of the report's language and tone so it was less dismissive and confrontational. I believe this was reasonable.
And you now know part of what's in case study 3. Okay. But can you see just in this early part of case study 2 where the risks were? Okay. So what I want you to do now is I want you to have a think, talk amongst yourselves on the table. You've got 5 or 6 minutes. You know what the questions are there. Have a look at it. I'll bring Arthur back up here with a gun to his head and get him to give you the answers afterwards. But my point about this is you can see where it's going, can't you? If I ask Kim to come and stand here, she wouldn't use my language because she's more articulate. But by the time it gets to Kim and workers' compensation land, she said it's like a plane coming into land. The lights have been on. You can see exactly what's going to happen. You can see how bad it is well before a claim gets in, and yet the claim still gets in. And by the time that happens, because the aggregational nature of damage, the damage is done. And in this case, fatally. So I want you to think, what is the interventions that could have occurred? And you've got what Arthur said before, organisationally, what were the changes? At an individual leadership and design level, what were the changes that could be done? Using what Arthur's told you to date, let's see what we can get out of identifying the risk and what the control would be, because I'm telling you now they're not hard and they're not expensive, okay? Back to work. Okay, can I call Arthur to stand, please?
And then we talk. Love it. Yeah.
All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Arthur to use his magic bits of paper to talk to you briefly, but to raise very quickly on that structure of analysis, what were the interventions that could occur? What were the problem and what were the interventions? Over to you, Arthur. I'll just turn you can use this.
I might use that one. You can see how complex it starts to become, and I had the luxury of sitting on one of the tables, and we went from organisational to individual to leader, and you can see the complexity and the importance of prevention. Clearly, if we were doing a lot of this up front, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in at the moment. But clearly we are in this position at the moment, and we're starting to think about what are those preventative areas. And first starting with, we can see consistently the change piece has been a hazard from the outset, and that's had a flow-on effect. So I'm going at an org level here at the moment. We're starting to see things like organisational justice or incivility. Those areas are starting to play out a bit. And then we start to move at the leader level, some of the hazards associated with that, both at the CEO level, equally at the frontline leader, capability, ability to lead and support Ed, Jan's manager supporting Jan, equally around some of those things as well. And then you've got the specifics of Ed as well within that, starting to isolate. We're hearing some of those conversations over there by one of the tables. Ed struggling with the change and not being supported in the right way. So really helpful way, and there's a lot more clearly connected to all of this, and there's plenty of conversations around that, because then you've got the councillors as well, and the influence of councillors on the CEO and how that's translated back into the workplace. So we can see how complex it can start to become, but a really helpful way to help us assess some of this. If we're focusing on what could Jan do, if I just use that by way of an example, being Ed's line manager, those 7 workplace focus areas can be a really helpful way. So Jan, what did Jan need at a leadership level? She may have needed some capability in how to best support Ed. That's one area around that, given Ed needed a level of support in a particular way. Equally, Jan needed support from her leader. Was Jan getting that, and what does that look like? And if I extend that upwards even further, does that leader have the support of the CEO, and what does that actually look like? But we see that leadership bucket, so it allows us to tackle that. I'm just using a working example. Then we move into the next focus area for Jan, if I use that again. Was Jan was Jan able to lead in a psychologically safe way? Or was she hindering that process with Ed? If I use that at an individual level, that's a bit of an assessment around that. From a cultural perspective, how was Jan managing the change piece? Now, was Jan clear on how she needed to communicate that? Was there clarity around the change? And how was Jan being supported through that change journey? But equally, that impact then that it has on Ed. Then we start to move in the work design area. What could Jan have been doing to support the work design of Ed, and probably more broadly as well? But if we just focus on Ed, we go into the work design, we start to see things like isolation. How was that being tackled? Work demands. There was a piece around communication, supporting Ed around communication. Role clarity, has something shifted from what Ed's role was to what it is now? So you can see that bucket of work design captures quite a lot. You'll see things in there which are work design, work systems, work management sits in there, equipment sits within that area of work design, and we're seeing quite a lot of communication around that. They're just some examples. Then we start to move into the coping and resiliency, and what we refer to there for Jan in particular. Are we giving coping and resiliency mean the right evidence-based training? So does Jan know how to communicate this change and change journey effectively? Is Ed given the right coping skills? Did he need support in how to communicate back and support around that, rather than saying coping and resiliency is some wellbeing training broadly? It's what is the unique risk for Ed. So I use the example, if your people experience challenging interactions with customers, not uncommon in your space, are we giving them skill to manage those interactions? That's connecting that intervention effectively compared to challenging interactions, and we'll do some mindfulness training. Doesn't quite connect. I'm not saying it's not helpful, but it's not going to tackle that inherent risk. So we're looking at what is that coping and resilience that's needed for Jan and for Ed. Then we go the early intervention. How was Jan leading through checking in? We spoke earlier, we heard a lot earlier, things around Ed requiring high levels of touch, connection, one-on-ones, checking in on some of those bits of information. So what was that level of early intervention that Jan was leading with through there? Any additional support sit under there? That's early intervention. Does Ed actually need some kind of support outside of what was happening in the workplace? Or does Jan need some of that support as well at the same time? And then we go into support recovery. What we mean, Ed was being impacted. It was happening right through and continues to happen in this stage. So what is that support, additional support to help Ed cope with the psychological distress that might be going on, and possibly equally with Jan as well around that? We've got increased awareness. That might be something broader. Do we need to have some awareness, education about neurodiversity, other broader communication as well? So you can see what I've done there. I've picked one individual, Jan. I've equally put Ed there, and I systematically move through those 7 focus areas to help structure my approach to what could possibly be done in each of those areas. Equally, I could do that at an organisation. That probably sits more in the prevention, the front end bit. We're further along now. We're starting to get into the individual areas, both Jan and Ed. Equally, I could put the CEO in that and do a bit of a mapping. I could actually put the council in front of that, those 7 focus areas, and go, what are the things we need to be thinking about?
Great. All right. Well, there you go. I think that's fantastic. The things I just want to raise are these. If you cannot define what good looks like, people cannot follow it. Okay? I know it sounds simplistic, but it's true. If you don't say what good is, whether it's this is how we behave, values and purpose, this is what we do, job description, and this is what good conduct looks like, that's not that hard, is it? So what's missing here is all of those elements. The second thing is beware of narratives. They form very, very quickly, where people form a view about somebody and then they socialise that view. So Ed becomes a bit of a pariah. He becomes a difficult guy. He's just a different guy. In fact, a year ago, he was a very successful guy. So narratives are very damaging. Can I just remind you of guys like Siegel, who wrote about how we reflect upon what is said and done. And one of the first things is to challenge normative narratives. When people say, this is what someone is, go, are they? Is that really what I think? Apply an independent mind. Then look at your own biases and go, is it my brain that thinks that because I don't like people like that? Is it? Test it. And finally, is there any better evidence than what I'm being told? Now, when I hear people gossip, I have an overwhelming desire to whack them around the ear. But part of it is because I know I'm getting untruth, okay, and it shits me. So when I used to be at another law firm and I'd go and visit the Queensland office, they all used to collect in the tea room. And they'd all gossip, and I dressed so badly they wouldn't realise that I was a practice group leader. So they'd keep gossiping. And after a while I'd go, any solutions? And then someone would go, oh, that's Andrew Douglas. I said, no, you've been going for 25 minutes and you've told me why everything's wrong, but is there any solutions? And can I just say a few things about what you've said? Because actually not many of them are true. Could I just tell you these things? And you'd see people going, I wish you'd just go home, which was fair enough too. But my point about it is that narratives distort like Chinese whispers over time, and they are no longer true. Ed was a good guy. He was not a bad guy. He was not a difficult person to manage. You just didn't manage him. Okay? So I want you to think that, and the last thing I want you to remember is that although there are psychological hazards and non-egregious ones, the non-sexual harassment, bullying, trauma, violence ones, but the other side of the coin is protective. And everything Arthur has talked about is, how do I give somebody who doesn't have reward and recognition? It's a positive, protective thing. When someone feels isolated, how do I bring them back into the tribe? Yeah? So remember, we talk about the hazards, but we forget the other side is actually how you protect. So it is a mirror of truth that sits within it. So please don't push them at arm's length and say hazards, because they're hazards out here, but they're protective here. All right, before lunch, okay? This is a big time. It's lunch. Can I say it's a good lunch too, because I ordered it. And I haven't had any morning tea, so I'll beat you there. But what I want you to read is the next case study, okay? It's a very long one, and you realise you've already had some of the precursors by the last set of Mitchell actors and actresses, okay? Over to you, Reid, and then I'll tell you when it's lunchtime. All right, welcome back. And for all those who've managed to survive, well done. So you know what we're about to do now. So what we're looking at is you've looked at the stuff which Arthur's helped you with. We're now getting into the law, aren't we? And so we look at what's occurred and we start to wonder, what would be the charges? What would the charges be against Joe, the CEO? What would be the charges against Nina? What would be the charges against Jan? Worth thinking about, isn't it? Because if we look at what's happened and you know where we've ended up, we've had a loss of life. Remember, workplace manslaughter was a piece of legislation designed to deal with psychological hazards because it is the only crime under the Safety Act that deals with a death outside of work. Okay? So I want you to think very simply, reckless endangerment means I understand a high risk of harm. It's a subjective element. I understand that risk. And I'm indifferent to that risk. In other words, I failed to act in a way which is appropriate. Not that I failed to act. I might do things like talk to someone, suggest they shouldn't do it. That's not enough. Reckless endangerment, $3.5 million fine for an organisation, 5 years, up to 5 years jail for anybody within the organisation, okay? When we look at workplace manslaughter, that means there's got to be a breach of a duty of care. Pretty easy here, isn't it? Because we've got the primary breach, haven't we? Unsafe place of work, failure to monitor health. All the primary duties easily breach. The next question is there a standard of care that is so wanting? So the standard of care for workplace manslaughter is reasonable care. That's a competent person doing their job. It's an objective test. So if you saw someone as vulnerable as this, you knew what the problem was and you stood by, was there any reasonable care? No. How bad was the lack of that reasonable care? Now, I'm not saying what it is because it's going to be for you to judge. But what I do want you to think about is this is more than simply a breach of a primary duty, isn't it? Which is reasonable practicability, identify hazard, determine the risk, institute a control to provide a safe place of work, to ensure there's been induction and training that is competency-based, to ensure there's been supervision, to ensure there's a system of work, to ensure monitoring health. They're all duties, okay? But I think it's a bit worse than that, don't you? Because the stated knowledge. Now, if we can just stop there, and I know I do this every time, so all of you who've had me speak before will know this discussion. If I asked you to write down the name, I'm not asking you to do it, to write down the name of the person in your environment who you know harms people and has been harming people for a significant period of time, and it's permitted, don't write it down. Every one of you knows who that person is. And they exist in every single organisation and nobody does something. To a discussion I had earlier, good is not about being nice. Good is about identifying what is right, being accountable to it and saying what is bad and dealing with what is bad, okay? So if I know someone is harming someone, okay, so I know the risk of significant harm and I'm indifferent, nothing's happened. Now, reckless endangerment doesn't need injury. Okay? The more a person is injured, the more serious, the more likely jail, but it doesn't need it. So on what I've just told you, the person you know, who the executive know, they're liable. The supervisor responsible is liable under reckless endangerment. And remember, outside of workplace manslaughter, there's Crimes Act manslaughter, which has similar elements, for which anybody in an organisation can be charged, and which recently, only 2 or 3 months ago, an employee was charged with it because WorkSafe couldn't utilise workplace manslaughter because they weren't an officer, okay? So the police charged. So I want you to understand just the basic law. It's nice and clear, but now you know the facts, where do you think it sits? So what we're going to do is we're going to court. We're going to the county court and having a look at some cross-examination. We're then going to see Matt Salter, my mate, pretend to be a regulator, some of the best fun you'll ever see. You just never see the level of discomfort in his shoes. It's just wonderful. We're then going to go to a chat show and look at what would happen if it got out. Then we'll come back again at the end of this to look at Richard and to say what you need to do in communications, because every one of you at some stage will deal with a serious injury or workplace fatality, and the first thing you must know is how to communicate. And nobody does. They go internally to the communications department, who always come out with great things like no comment. That's a really heartfelt employer, isn't it? I love that employer. or we're getting advice as to whether we appeal or not. That says a lot to the family, doesn't it? And to the affected workers. So remember, communication is about being good, being seen to be good in everything that you do, and there is a methodology in it. So please, nice to go to your comms department who've never done with a serious injury or fatality properly before, but get really good advice around that. And what Richard says, I want you to challenge people who try and go, I think it's best if we say nothing. Because to the family of the deceased, I don't think they like it. And after doing probably 70 or 80 fatalities, they definitely don't like it. What they want to feel is close to the organisation. They want to feel they're cared for and that they love the person who was their child or their partner who was in the organisation. They want your arms around them. It is the exact opposite of people trying to say, let's not say anything, we'll be liable. I think we should always start off in the right place, which is, are we good people? Yes. Do we good things every day? Yes, we do. Right, we don't harm people who have already been harmed. Rule 1. Okay? So let's go. You all read the problem. Freya, you ready to go?
Mr. Douglas, your witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honour. Yes, I will cross-examine. Mr. Scott, we've spent quite a period of time now reflecting on the nature of the application that was made by Kev and the impact that had upon Ed. Can I draw you now into a series of questions about the manner of communication that occurred with both Kev, a counsellor, and Lance, who was the applicant? You're aware of how Kev and Lance were communicating within the community and at work, weren't you?
Yes.
That communication involved emails with all councillors and ELT members, criticising the report that was produced by Ed, naming Ed on occasions, and subjecting him to ridicule.
It did.
And your response to that was?
Well, I brought all the councillors together, reminded them of the code of conduct, and also the obligation we have to our master plan and the delicacy of issues, advised them to cease communicating in that manner.
Thank you. And what was Kev's response?
He laughed and said he'd be a good boy.
Now, did he breach the code again?
He did, but my hands are tied.
You were aware of the mental health issues that Ed was suffering as a result of his report and what had occurred?
Yes.
Was the counsellor misconduct continuing after he returned to work?
I believe so.
Did you seek any assurances that he was safe at work from Nina?
Yes, from Nina and Jan.
And you know that he was being supervised at that stage by Clyde, who was a lower level, doing lower level work, but remained inflexible and difficult to manage, I think was the discussion that you had with Nina.
Yes, it was concerning.
At the time of his return to work, did you have grave concerns as to his mental health status and the impact of counsellor misconduct and internal work conduct that sought to dilute and diminish the impact of the plan and the policy?
Well, I knew he was unwell, and I knew it related to asking him to meet in the middle with councillors and also to confront the new councillor conduct.
Did you do anything specifically to prevent those two factors from affecting Ed?
Look, it's a tragedy that Ed couldn't see what we needed to do as a team, and I'm powerless to stop the councillors.
Thank you.
Mr. Douglas, do you wish to cross-examine the witness?
Yes, thank you, Your Honour. It is critical that you respond honestly. So if you need to reflect and look at the statement, do, but understand the consequences of not telling the truth are very serious. You're aware that Ed was lawfully allowed to refuse altering the report.
Yes.
Yet you and Jan sought to have him recraft the advice to avoid offending Kevin Lance.
Not the findings per se, just the language. It was provocative. He belittled their expert, called the evidence dishonest. None of it was necessary.
Do you understand the impact that both your and Jan's conduct had on Ed, seeking to water down that report?
I do. It was profound. He lost it.
When did you become aware of the heritage project of Lance being given to Ed?
Shortly after it happened.
And was that from Jan? And what did she say?
It was. I told her I thought it was unwise. She nodded, but she was at the end of her tether and she said, "What can I do? There's nothing else for him to do. Fuck it."
And did you tell her to take the project off him?
No.
Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Your Honour. Ms Elias, we've spent some time discussing the original application that was lodged by Lance. I want to move now to the heritage development. At the time of giving Ed the heritage development from Lance, were you aware of how precarious his mental health was?
I was, yes.
Did you assume that he would refuse the application, with the refusal bringing down the wrath of Kevin Lance?
Yes, I did.
Did you think that doing work in respect of the application by Lance may well trigger his already vulnerable state?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. G'day, Inspector. It's good to catch up. You've laid a series of charges, and let me walk through the charges, and you can explain what your rationale is before we start to finalise the evidence collection. In relation to Gangalong Council, Joe Scott and Nina Cosgrove, you've charged them with reckless endangerment, and you've said the council is attributed to be recklessly endangered because of the behaviours of the CEO, Joe Scott, and the Executive Director of Urban Planning, Nina Cosgrove. Looking at the elements, I can see why you say the first element is there is a high risk of harm. The evidence speaks to the high risk of harm to Ed Jansen. The next test though really is the carelessness or indifference of Joe Scott and Nina Cosgrove in respect of that high risk of harm. What is that indifference? What is it that you looked at? What's the critical evidence when you looked through and thought this is the appropriate charge?
The executive director, Nina, and also the chief executive, Joe, were knowledgeable of exactly what was going on with Ed. They were presented with findings from an independent medical report that had said that he was struggling from a psychosocial perspective. There was knowledge that he had been pushing back in relation to the findings from a report that he'd presented and tabled, and had advised them that he was struggling and he was going to work from home 3 days a week. That was backed up by his doctor as well, that he should work from home 3 days a week. And yet, and also to make sure that the work that he was doing was not face-to-face, that it was of a lower level. And despite that, and the indifference between his behaviour and with Jan as well, is that they kept pressing him. So Jan kept pressing him about the sort of work that he needed to do, especially with the Lance Heritage Project. So despite the knowledge that he was, had a demonstrable injury from the independent medical, and this return to work plan said that he needed to be on a certain level of work, they didn't adhere to that.
And I guess the other parts that concern me and why I could see the strength of why we should pursue these charges is there is a precursor that occurred, and that is the report that he originally drafted was in respect of a non-complying with both policy and plan run by Kev, who is one of the councillors, and the person who was a support of him, Lance, was the person in the Heritage Project who was doing exactly the same thing again. And once again, Jan, although not having a hands-on, was directing that work through Clyde, who was the intervening supervisor, because of the problems that existed between Jan. But Nina knew that, and Nina actually challenged Jan, and Jan basically said, "I don't care." So Jan had a state of knowledge that there was something that Ed was doing that he ought not be doing. She challenged Jan, the manager, and Jan said, I'm not doing anything about it. And Nina left it there. But for Joe, he understood that the councillor behaviour and the public behaviour towards Ed was a major problem for him. And yet, once again, with the knowledge of his psychiatric issues, of the mental problems he was struggling, one of the people who was one of his protagonists, Lance, was getting work to be done by him. I don't think you can get past that, can you?
I think that's compelling reckless indifference. It's utter indifference.
Once they've got knowledge about the risk and the risk is tangible, that he's actually got a demonstrable psychosocial injury, and that was due to him pushing back on the findings of his report, which was, again, he was saying that I'm doing it based upon policy, not on politics.
Yep.
And as such, by trying to keep pushing back, that made his psychosocial health deteriorate. There was knowledge. They had implicit knowledge that that was happening. He had requested to work from home, and they kept pushing. And
there were so many things they could do.
Yep.
Does that make sense? Let's go and have a look more at Jan Elias. Now, what you've done with the help of the Victorian Police is to lay an indictable charge of Crimes Act manslaughter against Jan Elias. Jan Elias wasn't an officer, so quite clearly we couldn't prosecute her under the safety legislation for workplace manslaughter. But when we look at what Jan Elias is charged with, what we need to prove is that there was a duty of care that she held. So she had two duties, the corporate duty under sections 21 and 22, but also the individual duty under section 25 to exercise reasonable care to prevent harm. But then what I need to be able to prove is there was such a gross falling short of the standard of care, which is reasonable care. That's an objective test as to how you would execute that duty. What were the elements that you found in such a wanting of standard of care by Jan Elias?
Well, she knew that he was quite vehement in pushing back on his report and his report findings, and he did not want to change any of that report. There was pushing from Jan in relation to that. There was pushing from Jan even though she knew about the fact that he was deteriorating. There was knowledge that even though he was on a return to work plan, that there was pushing him into the Lance Heritage Project, which also was leading to deterioration of his mental health.
It's worth saying at that stage, Inspector, she was not meant to be doing this.
No.
Clyde was the intervening manager because she was part of the original problem, and the return to work made it clear she was not to manage him.
Yes.
But she was still directing and controlling the work. And at the time of doing that, she understood Lance was an incredibly high risk for him because Lance was part of the anti-woke crew, for want of better expression, which were prosecuting the case by socialising their criticisms across the internet of him. And she knew that, and she still pressed ahead. And the other part is, when Nina said to her, how could that be appropriate? She said, what the fuck? I don't care. So what we've seen, I think, with Jan Elias, why she should be prosecuted manslaughter is this. What she did, every step that she took after the return to work, she did so with the knowledge that what she was doing was causing harm. So she knew what she was meant to do. She knew of the diagnosis and his psychiatric vulnerability and suicidal nature. She knew of all that stuff. And despite that, she continued to prosecute a course that was designed to hurt him. It was deliberate. I think we will have always trouble proving intent, but the objective view, which is what reasonable care is that she was either grossly negligent in what she did, and we don't necessarily have to prove that. There's two limbs to industrial manslaughter. But what we can show is such an incredible wanting of standard of care. There's no care that she gave, and in fact, it was the reverse. She was contemptuous of him. Is that your view on the interviews you've done?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, her knowledge was implicit. She knew exactly what was going on. She knew his deteriorating mental health, and she continued to push and she continued to interact, even though that deterioration was extremely obvious.
And she was not meant to be there.
She was not meant to be interacting.
There was an intervening person there to prevent the very risks that she was creating, and she was the dead hand behind, pushing and shoving and making it very clear that she'd get what she wanted.
That's exactly right.
Thanks, Inspector.
Thanks, Andrew.
So what I want you to tell me is this. You've heard the evidence, you've heard the cross-examination, all right? What do you think? Do you think they're guilty? All right, I don't want you all putting your hands up. Your jury, you're meant to consider for a few minutes, all right? So at a table level, remember, three charges of reckless endangerment. Counsel, by attribution through Nina and through Joe. Joe and Nina both charged with reckless endangerment. You've heard their evidence, okay, the critical evidence. Nina is charged with Crimes Act manslaughter, okay? And you've heard what she said, and you've heard the analysis done by Matt and I. So 5 minutes, come back as a jury, and I'm going to have a show of hands in 5 minutes as to whether they're guilty. We're going to go one by one, and then we'll find out whether you're right. How about that?
So welcome to Court Live, our weekly wrap-up of big things happening in courts around Australia this week. With me today, I've got Senior Inspector Matt Salter. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Manette. Pleasure to be here.
So big things in the Victorian Supreme Court today.
Yes, WorkSafe has successfully brought charges against the Chief Executive of Gangalong City Council, Joe Scott, for reckless endangerment, along with Nina Cosgrove, the Executive Director of Urban Planning. And the Crown has also successfully charged Jan Elias, the deceased supervisor under the Crimes Act, for manslaughter, and the council itself with reckless endangerment.
Okay. And when do you know what the sentence will be received, Matt?
The matters have been adjourned for sentencing in 2 months' time.
Okay. And are there any proceedings, that are not yet completed?
Yes, against Councillor Kevin Sanders for breach of Section 144 of the Act. We're expecting some resolution following the trial, but we expect it to go to a plea.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Manette.
Me first, that's a terrific smile, isn't it? Can I just say the question was against Kev Sanders, okay? Councillor. There is a Supreme Court authority that says you cannot interfere in a councillor's political behaviour, okay? It's wrongly been applied by lots of law firms and by WorkSafe that they can't touch them. That's not what that case says. They are liable as officers. We are the only jurisdiction in Australia where councillors are deemed to be officers. So Section 144 says, if you have knowledge of a risk and have a capacity to influence as an officer, then you will be liable if you don't exercise reasonable care. Isn't Kev Sanders? He should be there. He should be a lot more than that, but I just wanted to raise it there. It was asked several times, how do we get people who are officers in councils when they are the council and they feel immune? And I think for Arthur and I, we have very genuine hopes that that view will change with the new appointment of the CEO at WorkSafe. But we do need to start educating our councillors they can go to jail. Does that make sense? It hasn't happened yet, but we do need to have a conversation that shows them what their liability is, because maybe if nothing else, the idea of a toothbrush in their top pocket will help them understand that it's not a wise thing that they're doing. Now, what I've got next is very quickly, Richard, going through what it looks like to control once the sentence is down. Can I just say to you, the rules are, when you go to court, never, ever, ever, ever say after you lose, we're getting advice from counsel as to what proceedings we'll take next. When you've harmed somebody, you don't. Things that you do are these. You say, we've heard what the court has said. We understand that people have been hurt and we care about those people. And we know there's a significant learning we must take from this. That's where you start, isn't it? Okay? None of that can ever be used against you. But part of Richard's communication, one communication at every level starts with, we have heard, we care, and we want to heal and learn. They're the messages you must get through in crisis. If you don't do that, you'll lose all your staff. All right, let's see what Richard says.
Ed's story ought not to have happened. An absolute tragedy. So what can be salvaged? Certainly not the poor decision making, certainly not Ed's life. But what can be salvaged from this situation? of an organisation that appeared to have lost its way is to reset the culture, to reset the values of the organisation, to clarify what's expected in terms of behaviours, and to relaunch that initiative or program so that what happened to Ed doesn't happen again. On that foundation, on that basis, communications and engagement has a chance for meaningful change, for literacy, for building or rebuilding
Thank you very much for coming along. Okay. The last episode we had, and that was a bit churning, and I understand that. I might just grab some lights if I can. But I want to get across that the things that we put in front of you today are known to every one of you, aren't they? I didn't write something you didn't know. Okay. In fact, I wrote it because I do know you, and it comes from you. And I thought it's a story that sort of has to be told. This is our final in the series of psychological hazards this year. Next year, we're going to move on to looking at stuff which is more complex, which is hazards that have a psychological component, but other component like contractor management and serious injuries. But I wanted to get across what are the foundational parts of how to manage it, what is the governance structure that needs to sit under it, and what is the responsibility of our senior leaders in owning and managing that process. So for all the people I go and chat to, and most of you I drop out and have a chat to and steal all your ideas, thank you very much for that. Thanks for coming along and support it. We'll be back again in April with this, for there'll be 3 more next year. Next year we will be running to support both safety and injury management a 2-monthly breakfast, which is only short. We will bring along some experts in different things to support you. We'll do a case study just to give it a push around and a shove to see what it looks like. But the idea of that is to have a bit of fun and to get you to share. One of the things that I've found amazing over the last 3 months since I came around talking to people was how hard premium management is and how different premium management has been run in different councils. I'd love to share that because there are so many unique ideas that have been used. I'd love people to share their experiences where they do have troubles, one, so they don't feel alone with it. Because when I come and chat, everyone goes, we just feel lost in this, but it's actually what the next council's feeling and it's what the next council is. That sense of community, I think, is a really important part. But it's nice to also be able to talk to a lawyer who's sitting in the middle and say, is there something simple that slices through this? Like the conversation we had earlier around a person who is suffering some issue that is causing them difficulty at work. Safety law is so eloquent, isn't it? You don't need employment law. Why get lost in employment law when safety law tells you the answer? So we thought we'd do that, and if that goes well, then we'll extend the invitation and do one with people in culture. But for the moment, and if people in culture people want to come to the safety one, you're very, very welcome. But we want to follow the psychological hazards path over the next 12 months to build that skill, that knowledge, and then we can start building it a bit more broadly. So you'll get something on that shortly. But other than that, can I just again thank the great marketing team and the videography team for what they've done. Mitchell Shire, a huge round of applause there, yeah. I am looking for volunteers for next year, okay? I noticed they're dropping off a lot recently. I used to have a lot of volunteers, but they've gone very quiet. And look, be safe out there. See you soon.